Begin the current Daf, Mesechta Kidushin Daf Chav Tes. Begin 12 lines down at the top of the Yamid. We continue with the halacha, the next Mishnah, transitioning a little bit from the first part of the first parak, which was discussing that of different kinyonim, because we spoke about Ha'isha Niknis, acquiring a woman, acquiring Abedivri, acquiring Abekanani, acquiring Behemoths, acquiring Karka, Matatlin. Our Mishnah, and then regarding the differences between the kinyonim of Hekdesh and that of a Hedyid, our Mishnah continues in a related vein regarding Kidushin, due to the fact that that's an obligation of a parent to get their kid married off. But then it gets us into a whole conversation regarding responsibilities that parents have to their children and children have to their parents. Just corresponds to today's daf. Some discussing today's daf what's called mitzvahs haben ala'av, obligations for a son that's on the father. The father has responsibility to circumcise his son, to redeem him if he's the firstborn. Some other important terms and concepts are a loan that's written in the Torah, meaning if there's a Torah obligation, do we say that that's considered like a loan, that there's already a shibud, that there's already a lien on the assets of the person who has that responsibility? Some of the other responsibilities the father has is lam the Torah, to teach his son Torah, and some other things that we'll see that the child has responsibilities for his parents too. To begin the current daf, Daf Chav Tes, we begin with the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Kol mitzvahs haben ala'av. Gemara is going to explain the whole Mishnah. How do you translate this? All the mitzvahs of the son on the father. Anoshim chayav menashim b'tureis. So the Gemara will explain right away, so we won't get into detail. The men are responsible and the women are exempt. Kol mitzvahs ha'av alaben. But the other way, all the commandments of the father on the son, echad anashim b'chayavin, both men and women are responsible. Then continues the Mishnah with a well-known Talmudic dictum: any positive time-bound commandment, meaning to say that it's the specific time that caused the mitzvah to come. It's not at all times. Men are responsible for, and women are exempt. Any positive commandment that's not a time-bound commandment, it's not because of a specific time. Both men and women are going to be obligated. And any negative prohibition, whether it is a specific time that causes it, whether it's not a specific time that causes it, both men and women are going to be obligated. There's three exceptions. From not to go around the corners of the head to even out, that you get a mushroom haircut, totally cutting off all the corners, which is what we call the payas. Women, although that's a negative prohibition, are not obligated in that one. And number two is about tashchis, not the classic one that we call about tashchis. What's called, it said, don't destroy the corners of your beard, which is, there's 5 negative prohibitions to shave off with a razor the corners of the beard. Women don't have that problem. And number three, a third negative prohibition that women are not obligated is about tamal mason. The halacha is that kahanim have an isser of becoming tamal mason. Women do not have that negative prohibition, but all other leisa says, whether it's time bound or not, they are obligated. So now the Gemara clarifies, my kol mitzvahs haben ala'av. What is this words that you said in the opening words of the Mishnah, that all the commandments of the son on the father, men are obligated, but women are exempt? So if you're going to translate, you'll translate kol mitzvahs to haben, that he's mechuyev, ala'av, that he has to do for his father, and that you're telling me nasha b'turis, women would be exempt. But Vatanya in the Brisa, pasuk says in a Yikra, ish, it starts off the pasuk a man. Ish. I would only know that this pasuk that we're going to quote in 1 second would only be for a man. Ish, and how do we know this pasuk applies to a woman too? When the pasuk says ish, a man. Of his father and his mother, tiro, they should fear. They should. You said ish. Oh, we're talking about 2 people. Meaning, there's a man and a woman that are obligated. So you see that the mitzvahs that a child has to the father is not just men obligated, it's women too. So rather, Rabbi Huda says, no, this after you translate the Mishnahs. Mitzvahs haben hamutolis al ha'av lasses lebnai. So it's not the mitzvahs that a son has on his father that he has to do for the father. No, it's the mitzvahs that a son has that's incumbent on the father to do for his son. Like those things that we're going to mention in the Brisa in a moment. That responsibility is Anashim Chayavim and Anashim Turais. Men are responsible, but women are exempt. Meaning the father has to do them, but not the mother. That's how you have to translate the Mishnah. It says the Gemara, Tanin al-Hadatan Rabban. This supports what we're learning in the following Brisa. The Brisa goes into detail about some of the responsibilities that a father has for his child. Ha'av, the father, Chayav b'bnoi, he's responsible for his son, L'moiloi, to circumcises. He got to circumcise his son. If the child's a firstborn, he has to redeem him with 5 slum, giving it to the kain. Ulalam the Torah, he has to teach his son Torah. Ulasi Isha, and this is where it comes into our Parakar Masechta, and he has to marry him off to a woman, which the Gemara is going to learn them all out from Sukkim, how we know this. Ulalam the Umnis, and to teach him a profession. V'yeshem, some say Afla Shita b'moyim, even to teach him how to swim in the river, because maybe he's going to go out on a boat, and the boat's going to sink, and he's going to be in danger if he doesn't know how to swim, so you got to teach him how to swim also. Yehudaima, he says, whoever does not teach a son a profession, Malamde Listus is teaching him to be a bandit. Says the Gemara, Listus Sokadaitach, where he's teaching him how to rob people, but he just sat here and didn't do anything. Says the Gemara, Malamde Listus, it's as if you taught him how to be a bandit, because since he doesn't have a profession, and he's not going to have bread to eat, he's going to go to the crossroads, and he's going to go ahead, and he's going to mug the people that are walking by. So the father that doesn't teach his son the profession what to do and how to make parnasa, he's teaching him listus to be a bandit. So now the Gemara goes in detail to explain the halacha of the brisa. So the first thing we said that a father has to do for his son, which might actually be the first thing that he has when the baby is 8 days old, is lamayloi, is to circumcise his baby that he had. Menalan, where do we know that's responsibility of the father? Because the Chassidus says the pasuk in Bereshis, Vayom Avram said to Benai. Avram circumcised his son Yitzchak. As actually someone in my community just had a baby over Shabbos, it's going to be on Rosh Hashanah. The swarm actually being down. Should name him Yitzchak because Yitzchak was. We find that that's the Akedah. The Yitzchak, he's actually should name Yitzchak. We'll see if he does. But Avram Avinu circumcised his son Yitzchak. So therefore, that's how we know the father has to circumcise his son. Says Gemara, but says the Gemara, what happens if, let's say, the father doesn't circumcise him? The community, the court, they have responsibility to circumcise him. The Chassidus says a pasuk previously, it says it says you in the plural. You should circumcise all male. Who's you, lachem? It's the Jewish community. They have a responsibility that if there's a child that wasn't circumcised because the father was negligent, so they have an obligation. Now, says the Gemara further, and if the community doesn't circumcise him, then he has responsibility when he becomes an adult that he has to circumcise himself. How do you know that? The Chassidus says over there in the pasuk, "V'ogel zachar," and the foreskin of the male, that he won't circumcise the flesh of his foreskin. We're talking about to him, to the guy himself. But Nichas is going to get kagas, that's only when you become an adult. So you see, the guy himself has to circumcise himself, and we're going to see all these things that he has responsibility, which is a lesson I tell people all the time, that even though you didn't get love, whatever it is, from your parents, you have the obligation when you become an adult to love yourself. And you see that even though your parents have to give it to you, they have to circumcise, it's their responsibility as parents, but they didn't, and the community didn't do it. When you become an adult, you take responsibility for yourself. And you can love yourself, you have compassion, you do all those things that a person has to have, and don't blame anyone, because you see that it's an obligation for you yourself to go and do it for yourself. By an Eved, we say that, does he get kares? Good question. What does the pasuk say? Well, definitely the person himself. If the father doesn't do it, I don't recall if he gets kares. Not, but what we say by I'm trying to remember exactly how we say it. Now, how do we know that the woman, and this is what we're saying, that we said kol mitzvahs haben al av, which meant the mitzvahs of the son that are responsibility on the father, that the anoshim, the men, meaning the father is chayav, but the women are exempt. So where do we know let's say a woman has her husband passed away, Leilenu, and she has a baby. So we do know that she's not obligated to circumcise her son. Because I mean, she won't be any less than Bezdin then, but she doesn't have a personal responsibility like the father. Because it says over there in that pasuk, "Kashatziva oisay elikim," the way God commanded him. What's him? Him is telling you oisay v'loy oisa. Him, Avram Avinu, but not her, not Sarah. Sarah did not have responsibility to circumcise her Yitzchak. Now, says the Gemara, Ashkechon miyad. Well, Shlois actually asks, he says, what do you need a pasuk for? It's a mitzvah shesh mangarama, because the baby's only circumcised day 8. So women should be exempt anyway, because the mitzvah shesh mangarama. Why do you need actually a very seminal taisvis? Because he says, since from the 8th day on, there's no hefsek, it doesn't stop, that's not zman garama. So that's a very big yisod in the mitzvah shesh mangarama, how to qualify. Once it starts, it never stops. So that's not called zman garama. But then he says, wait a second, it is zman garama because you can only circumcise during the daytime, not at nighttime. He says, okay, it's going like that. Man da'ama who holds that it's actually could be during day or at nighttime. But yeah, according to us, then we would say that not. But according to that man da'amar, you would have to have a miyad of oisa v'lo oisa. Then says the Gemara, ashcha miyad. Wait a second, we find that this was then by Avram Avinu. It was told to him like this: l'doyres manolam. Where do we know that there's an obligation for all future generations for fathers to do this and not for mothers? So it's on Rabbi Shmuel, which is a concept mentioned in many places. Wherever it says the word tzav, Rashi brings down the parashat tzav, but here the word said kashetziva oisa yelikim. It used the word tzav. The word tzav is ein ele zirus. It's that a person should have alacrity regarding the thing, which we know mila we do first thing in the morning. It's all shaila. We can do the mila before, after Kriyas Torah. Do you do it later on? But Akaban is a lashon zirus, and miyad uladeiras, and also there should be. It's for then, right away, and also for all future generations. So you see that the halacha of what was told to Avram Avinu was for all future generations. Where do we know this? How do you know that the word tzav means all these three things? So zirus the chsiv in the Varim, it says v'tavis Yeshua, it says to command Yeshua, v'chazkeyu v'amteu, and strengthen him and fortify him. So you see that tzav means to mechazik someone. That's lashon zirus. And miyad l'deres, how do you know it means that it's for now all future generations? The chsiv pasuk b'midbar, it says menayoyim, from today. Hashem commanded and on for all 3 generations. You see that the word tzav was hayoim and l'doyrei seichem. So you see that the word tzav is all 3 things. So therefore, since it said kashatziva oisa elokim, it used tzav. So you know that the halach of milah, the responsibility of a father, but the child is not only by miyad b'Avram Avinu, but for all 3 generations, it's the responsibility of a father to circumcise his child. Number 2, we said in the Brisa, was lifdoisa. There's an obligation for the father and not the mother to redeem his firstborn son. Says Gemara Manol, where do we know this from? Because it says a pasuk in Shemais. It says, Kol b'chor b'necha tifta. All the firstborn sons, you should go ahead and redeem. So you see that there's an obligation on the father of your son to redeem. Says the Gemara again, similar like we said before regarding Mila. Where the father does not redeem him, the son himself has an obligation when he becomes an adult. He has to redeem himself, and if his father didn't redeem him. The chsiv book, it says, it says, either some say the gear says padi tifta or tifta tifta. In that same pasuk, it says padi tifta, and it says again the word tifta. See, either it's because of the redundancy of tifta, or because it says one time padi, then it says tifta. So it's an extra word telling us that, yeah, he has to also go ahead and redeem himself. Now, it says the Gemara, however, the mother, where do we know that she is not commanded to redeem her son? Meaning, because since it's a mitzvah sazeh, shaloyas man gerama, it's not like Mila. Although it starts at day 30, it never ends the obligation. It's not time-bound commandment. So you need a pasuk to exclude the mother. How do you know she's not mechuyev? Because the chsiv, it says in the pasuk, tifteh. Now you could read the word tifdeh as tipodeh, shall become redeemed. What does it teach us? The kri and the ksav are being compared one with the other. That what? Kol shemitzuvah liftis es atzmai, whoever is commanded to redeem themselves, which is tipodeh, mitzuvah liftis es acher, has a commandment to redeem others. That's tifdeh. So whoever is not in the tipodeh, whoever is not commanded to be redeemed themselves, It's like commanded to tifteh, to go ahead and redeem others.
Including himself.
That person, whoever that is, which is the woman only. Every firstborn son, every male is obligated, if they're a firstborn, to redeem themselves. So then they're obligated to redeem their son. A woman, as we're going to say right now, who's not obligated to redeem herself, would not be obligated to redeem anyone else, meaning her own son. Says the Gemara. Is that Tully in the Machlekes? Elsewhere, Taisa explains that not like no one disagrees. There's a question of which one's primary. Here, for some reason, the Gemara is saying it that it's comparing the way it's read to the way it's written. Yeah, would others disagree? Would it be good going according to that Mandama? Yeah, the Gemara takes it for granted. I think everyone agrees that there's both of those principles. I think sometimes if one is primary, then we'll choose one over the other. Which one's primary? But if you could do both, yeah, Shaila is why we're reading a word. I guess it lends itself. Yeah, it's a good question. Exactly why the Gemara is taken for granted that we are going to read it one way and it's written another way. Maybe because it could be written another way. Yeah, you have to know. Al Kapanim says Gemara, herself. Where do we know that she's not obligated to redeem herself? As Rashi explains very importantly, Tais also very interesting, because although we're going to say in a moment that her father is not obligated to redeem her, because it says in the pasuk, "B'char b'necha," the firstborn of your son. Yeah, but maybe she herself has to redeem herself when she becomes an adult, because you could read it tipodeh, that she should be redeemed. So obviously, you see that the mitzvah of the son should also be on her, because she could be tipodeh, and if she would have to have tifteh, because it's a mitzvah in as magrama. So don't bring me a raya that the father doesn't have to redeem her. Good, that the father doesn't have the chiv on her, but she might have her own chiv. So how do you know that she doesn't have to redeem herself? And then if she does, then she would have to redeem her firstborn son too. Says the Gemara, no, because the chsiv, it says in the pasuk tifteh tipodeh, which is, you could read it the other way too. Kol shacher b'tzum lifdaisai. So we're going both ways. Whoever has an obligation to redeem, that others have to redeem him, meaning the father, mitzvah liftazazim, but then you have to redeem yourself. Meaning, if you are tifteh, then you'll have tipodeh. But if others don't have to redeem him, meaning the woman, her father doesn't have to redeem her, she's not in tifteh. Tifteh is you should redeem, like that your child. Her father doesn't have to redeem her, so she doesn't have tipodeh. She doesn't have an obligation to redeem herself. Says Gemara, wait a second. How do you know that others don't have her, meaning the father doesn't have an obligation to redeem her? Says the Gemara, because I'm a kurd, but it says all the firstborn of your sons you should redeem, which is benecha v'le b'naisecha, is your son and not your daughter. So that's clear. So it's interesting how it evolves. It's that so the father doesn't have an obligation to redeem his daughter because it says b'chol b'chol b'necha. Now, okay, so she is not in tifdeh because the father doesn't have to redeem her. So now she's not in tipodeh, so she doesn't have to redeem herself. Now that she's not tipodeh, she doesn't have to redeem herself. Now she doesn't have tifdeh. She doesn't have an obligation to redeem others, which is her own firstborn son. So we're going both ways. We're going first from tifdeh to tipodeh, and then from tipodeh back to tifdeh to show us that the woman, since she doesn't have to redeem, since others don't have to redeem her, she doesn't have to redeem herself, and since she doesn't have to redeem herself, she doesn't have to redeem others. I said, learn in a brisa that what happens if you're in a situation where who liftais, that this father, he's oleh, he came from who knows where, he was assimilated, whatever. The point is, his father never redeemed him, and he's now 72 or 56 or 38, whatever it is. But he finds out that he's a firstborn son. You have to be redeemed. Ubenai liftais. And his son is also firstborn, and they're both being mukuriv, and they came to the center, and they're saying, okay, we're going to make a whole ceremony. Pinya ben. Says the Tanakama, who kaim libnai. So it costs money. You have to give the kain a certain amount of money. and they don't have so much. So the father comes before his own son to be redeemed. Yudami says, no, the obligation to redeem his son comes before the obligation to redeem himself. Why would that be? It's more interesting. His pidyon haben was his father's responsibility. Now, if his father doesn't do it, yeah, okay, he has to do it himself. But it was his father's responsibility. And his son is the mitzvah of his son on him. So therefore, you should do your son's first, because that's your primary obligation. Your own is secondary when your father is negligent and doesn't do it. So therefore, do your son before your father. That's a machlekes between Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. However, the Gemara qualifies this machlekes. Rabbi Yomi says, everyone agrees as we continue to Beis, where there is not but elocha mishlam. Literally, these people are destitute and no one's going to lend them. There's the free loan society. They have nothing. They only have 5 slum. Then everyone agrees, who couldn't libnoi? No, the father should redeem himself before his son. My time, what's the reason? Says Gemara, mitzvah de gufi adifa, which is generally the principle. The mitzvah of your own body comes first, so you'll redeem yourself. Ki pligi, when do they disagree? Interesting case. Machlekes Rashi tells exactly how to translate this, but is heicha de ikka chamesh mishubadim. There is 5 slum that is collateral, meaning that it is a lien that was already sold off to someone else. Someone bought from this father. Father was working in who knows what, he barely made any money. But there's 5 that there's a shibur on it, and v'chamesh b'nei chayrin. And he only has in his pocket 5 slum that are available. So what's the machlekes? So the Gemara explains. Yehuda holds that yes, you're going to do the son first. Why are you going to do the son first? Because quote unquote, a loan that's written in the Torah. What do you mean a loan that's written in the Torah? Meaning, pidyon haben, the redeeming of his own self, is a responsibility that you owe this money to the kohen. So, it's like it's written in the document. So, the redeeming of his own self, he was obligated in that to the kohen before these karkois were sold off, what's called shibud karkois. There was a lien on it already. The kohen, to give it to him when you were a 30-day-old baby. So obviously it's before whatever business you did. So the kohen could snatch from the lekuchas, from the buyer, and say, hello, you took this from him, but this I already had a lien on this money before you bought this from him. So therefore, bahani chamish. You want to know, meaning the kahanim, like we say when it comes to, we don't say each specific one. Here, but he could represent the kahanim. He's saying these man of shach. He said they owe the kahanim, not you. I could be someone else, but you have to give it to them. I hear. So he says bahani chamish. So these 5 available ones that you should go ahead and parik lebre, use that to redeem your son, and that's not considered oinah, like cheating the buyers, because that makes sense that you would use your first available 5 to redeem your son, because there's a kedim over there. Because a mitzvah haben ala av is more responsibility on the father than his own pidyon haben. So go use the 5 available ones. When Yehuda was saying b'nai koidmai, he meant to say from the 5 available you have in your pocket, take out the 5 slum and redeem your son. Then v'azal koyin v'tarifle. Then the koyin is going to go ahead and he's going to snatch from the lekuchais, l'chamish mishubadim, from the 5 that were already sold off l'didei, for the redemption of the father's own self. Because a milvah ksuba turki ksuba shtardami. So there's a lien on that. So you'll be able to get, and only a lien for the father, obviously, because he's been around for many years already. So there's that shiba that the kohen had was way before the lekuches. But Rabban Zar, they hold no. That they said that he goes and he does the pidyon haben for himself before his son, because milvah the chsib by Raisa alone that's written in the Torah, lav ksuba shtardami. It's not like it's written in the document, and therefore you cannot collect from Mishabadim, from the lekuches. Okay, so therefore the mitzvah of his own body is better, because ultimately you're not going to end up doing his own pinyan ben. So that, like we said before, everyone agrees if all you have is 5 Islam, most definitely we're going to say his own pinyan ben comes first. Mitzvah gufei adifa. The shaila was in such a case that maybe Yehuda is going to say that no, do the son first, because then you'll be able to chap arayin, you're able to chap ois the which Rashi is explaining that no, it's not considered no, but Tosis has difficulty with that. Tosis actually says a different shot because of that, a complex type of a case with a zayda and whatever with the obligations. But that's the way Rashi explains it. That it's not enough because the Ma'aser Mitzvah Ben Alav comes first, and yes, then the 5 that Mishabon will have to collect because Milva Aksuv Barai says Kiksuv B'Shtar Dami. That's according to Rabbi Yehuda and not like the Rabban. Now, continuing on a related discussion regarding the other mitzvah that we spoke about of Pidya Ben, so meaning the same mitzvah but in a different context. In the Brisa, Liftei says B'nai. Let's say he has the need to redeem his firstborn son. And v'lalas l'regel, and to go alil regel, meaning the Pidya Ben day 30 is mamish right when Yom Tov is. So he's like, okay, should I go be oil regel, which is a mitzvah, or should I be redeeming my son? So it says the Tanakama, Poides Benai, first he should redeem his son, achach oil regel, then he should go be oil regel. Yudami disagrees. He says no, oil regel, achach Poides Benai. No, go be oil regel and then redeem your son. Why? Shazu mitzvah veres. Oil regel is a time limited. It's when you got to get there in time for Yom Tov. V'zum mitzvah she'en le'veres. Pidyan ben, it's not a mitzvah that you're going to lose out. You can do it for the rest of his life. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, according to Yehuda, Kedom Matam, said his reason. Says you can do Pidyan ben until you get a coin, whatever. You're going to miss the whole Alil Regel, and chap that right. But Rabban Matam, what's the reason Rabban that they hold that no, you first redeem your son and then you be Alil Regel? Because Amakra the Pasuk says in Shemais says Kol b'cha b'necha tifte. All the firstborn of your sons you should redeem. And then it says, Lo yira pon harekam. So the same pasuk says, don't see my face empty-handed. Well, in that same pasuk, it first says Pidya Ben, and then it says, Ali l'regel. Similarly, so yeah, I mean, you're saying then you would be able to make it up, you say. Whatever, yeah, l'chayr it's every Yom Tov.
What's the punishment for not being
What does it say?
Yeah.
Could be. In the Brisa, Al Kapon there is a chiyuv. Continue on this mitzvah Pidya Ben. How do we know that if a person has 5 sons from 5 women, Shchayv lift his kulan, that he has obligation to redeem all those firstborn sons? It says in the pasuk, "Kol b'char b'necha tifta." What's kol? Why have to say kol? Just say b'char b'necha tifta. What's all the firstborns of your son you should redeem? To tell you that every single one, if you have all these wives, each one of them having a b'char, you have to redeem them. Well, of course, it depends on the opening of the mother's womb. If this is the lady's first baby boy, the first baby, and that's a boy, so then of course obligation. Says no, would you say you learn out the halacha of firstborn from inheritance. Just like over there, the firstborn who gets the double portion of inheritance is the first of the vigor of the father. And so over here, regarding the Bechor, Pidya Ben would be the father's first vigor. Obviously, the first woman and all the other women that came afterwards would not have the halacha. Well, I'm saying no, it's totally dependent on the mother. And therefore, Kol comes to tell you that halacha, that even from 5 women, he would have to do 5 Pidya Bens. Now, continuing on the halacha, the Brisa, going back, so we said the father has obligation, and one of them was Lalamde Teira, to teach him Teira. So, what do we know? That the father has obligation and not the mother. Because the Chassid says, the in the Devarim, it says, you shall teach them your sons. Now, says the Gemara, so you see from there that you have an obligation to teach your sons. Okay, now same thing we said before. The father didn't teach him. Obligation to teach himself. Go on Torah anytime, watch a shiur. You have an obligation to teach yourself Torah. It's never too late. The Chassid says the pasuk, ulamadatem, meaning like Rashi points out, it's a different, although it's the same word, it's a different pasuk. The pasuk in the bottom, hey, ulamatem oisem, you shall learn. Ushmartem asoisem, you should safeguard to do them. That if the tata didn't teach you Torah, or the Rebbe, whoever was that wasn't responsible, so then you go and you teach yourself. Now, Says the Gemara, "Ihi minom delei mechayeva." Where do we know that she is not obligated? The mother is not obligated to teach her son Torah. The Chassidus says in the pasuk, "V'limadatem." It says, "V'limadatem es b'neichem." So here also you could read "V'limadatem" as "Ulamadatem," that you should learn. Again, the same idea to compare the way it's written to the way we're reading it, that she's not commanded to teach her son's Torah, because kol shemitzuva l'lmoid, whoever obligated to learn, meaning who has ulamadatem, they're mitzuva l'lamed, they have to teach. That's v'lamadatem. Kol she'ein mitzuva l'lmoid, whoever is not obligated to learn, whoever does not have ulamadatem, ein mitzuva l'lamed, does not have an obligation to teach, does not have ulamadatem, which therefore says the Gemara, okay, so I know you're saying that if you don't have to learn, you don't have to teach. But where do we know that the woman herself, that the mother, does not have obligated to come to her own Daf Yomi shiur and sit down and learn Torah? Who said a woman is not obligated in learning Torah? Because the Chassidus says in the pasuk, "V'lamatem ulamatem." Again, we're doing the same flop on both ways of how to translate and compare v'lamatem, that you should teach, and l'madtem you should learn. Meaning, whenever there's obligation for others, meaning namely the father, an obligation to teach him, then, meaning if there's a v'lamadatem, then there's a ulamadatem. If someone has to teach you, then you have to teach yourself. But if the others don't have obligation to teach him, then he doesn't have to teach himself. Says okay. Uminayin, how do I know? How do I know that others, meaning the father, does not have obligation to teach his daughter Torah? Says the Gemara, the Makra. That says in the pasuk, that you should teach your sons, not your daughters. So again, interesting the way it goes. Since it says that the father has an obligation to only teach his son's daughters, not his daughter, so therefore, what we see from there is that others don't have to teach her Torah, so there's no v'lamadatem. So if there's no v'lamadatem, there's no ulamatem. She doesn't have to teach herself Torah. And now we'll go flip the other way. Now that there's no ulamatem, she doesn't have to teach. Now that there's no v'lamadatem, she does. Now that there's no ulamatem, she doesn't have to teach herself. So no, there's no v'lamadatem, she doesn't have to teach others Torah. It goes the same way, meaning just like we said in the previous halacha. That's how we know women don't have to learn Torah, they don't have to teach Torah, and no one have to teach them Torah. And they do the homework, but that's not their mitzvah of learning Torah. So now we'll learn the Brisa. What happens if, again, similar like we said regarding Pinya Ben, of hu l'moed b'nei l'moed? What happens if other the tata king ain't learning, and the son goes to work, or v'nei l'moed, or maybe the son goes to learn and the father goes to work? Says the Tana, he comes before his son. Your obligation to learn Torah yourself. What's this? You're paying limit, all these different things for the kids. You go learn. Go sit down and learn, and stop getting him all these tutors and chavruses. You pay for your own learning. Reader Amy says, no, depends. If his son is diligent, and he's a mutzlach, and what he learns, it's the father sees that he's very successful, and he doesn't have enough money to support both of them to learn. His son should learn first, and he should go work for Panasa, and he should provide for the family. Like we have Rabbi Yaakov, the son of Rav Acha bar Yaakov, that Shadi Rabu l'kamed Abaya. So the father went to work. He says, okay, my son is a mutzlach. I'm going to send him in front of Abaya, the grace of Abaya, to go learn Torah. Kiyasa, when the son came back home, Chazi, the father saw, wasn't sharp his teachings that he had learned. Amalei, the father says, I'm better than you. Tovat, you sit, I'm going to yeshiva now. And you go, and you work, and I'm going to go learn. Because again, even Rabbi Yehuda only holds it's the son, and not the father. If the son is mutzlach, grace of mutzlach in the way he does, some people that have sons, taka know how to learn, taka shmak, metabren. So then, yes, but if not, then the father himself, even according to him, should go and learn Torah. Now, Shama Abai, this is a parenthetical, but Abai heard the Kava'asi, that the great Rav Acha bar Yaakov was coming in place of his son to come learn. Now, the thing was, Havahu Mazik Be'Rabban Abaya. There was a harmful force that was in the yeshiva of Abaya. and the Beis Medrash was far away from the settled area. That's how they used to have their Bate Midrashim. Even if two people would enter, even during the daytime, meaning mazikim, usually with one person they damage, not with two, and during the nighttime, not by daytime. Here the mazik was so bold and so audacious that even during the daytime, even when two people have a mesazki, it would harm people, this harmful force. So Abaye said to the people, he said, okay, look, let no one host Rav Acha to stay in their house. And by default, he's going to have to stay in the Beis Medrash. And because of his piety, maybe a miracle is going to happen, and then he's going to kill the mazik. So he came. He had no choice. No one gave him a place to stay. But he slept the night, in the yeshiva. Idamile, so the mazik, the harmful force, appeared to him, kitanina de shivereshvasa, like a snake with 7 heads. It had 7 skulls, like really out of one of these VR, games, it's I don't know, whatever they have, these shooting games. Kol kriya, the kara, every kneeling that Rav Acha, who was davening regarding that mazik, that he bowed down, nosachad reishe, one head fell off. Or maybe one of those powers they have, somebody, to make the, whatever, I don't know, it's too old. But so every bowing, another head came off. The next day he said to them, if a miracle didn't happen, so Kintin, you guys put my life in danger that you had me spend the night. Okay, whatever lessons are supposed to be learned out from that. Now the Gemara continues and says, we learned in the Brisa that on this, continue on this theme regarding the responsibilities, some of the things we mentioned here were responsibilities that the father has. So, so 2 of the things we actually mentioned that the father has a responsibility for his son was to teach him Torah and get him married. So now the Gemara gets into an interesting conversation about which one comes first. If a person could learn or could get married. So says the Brisa, Yilma Torah, first learn 20, 21, and then marry a woman. Now, let's say it's not possible for him without a woman. What does it mean, not possible? If you look to Teisri Azak on the side of the Gemara, his yetzer, his inclination is overpowering him. Okay, you see, get married and then learn Torah. Now, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Meshmuli says, the halacha is, get married, and then learn Torah. He says, it can't be. You have the mill on his neck, the yasik b'Torah, and he's going to learn Torah. Meaning you have the oil of panasa. How's it possible for a guy to learn when he has a panasa that he has to provide for his family? Now, says the Gemara, it's not a machlekes, even though it sounds clear like a machlekes. Do you learn first and then get married? Do you get married then learn? Says the Gemara, which is machlekes Rashi and Taisis, halon. Says Rashi, that's for us, meaning in Bavel, which the Gemara was made, they would go and they would learn Mishnayos from the Tanoim in Eretz Yisrael. Now, since they went to learn away from the house, so you don't have any responsibility. The guy goes to yeshiva, the wife's left with the kids, and it's what is this going on over there? No problem. You go out of town, and we got learning. So why not get married first? Because then you don't have any hirurim, because it's okay. You know what I'm saying? You're trying time giving, right? And that's it. And now, so then he goes and learns Torah. So for people in Babel, Taka get married first, and then go learn in Eretz Yisrael, because you won't have the responsibilities anyway. But V'halahu, Rabbi Yechon was talking about for the people in Eretz Yisrael, that they learned in their place with the Tanoim more in Eretz Yisrael. You're going to get married, okay? Then every third hour, the wife is going to say this and say that and say that and say this. That's it. That's the whole Sdarmar out the door. You're not here to learn. Don't get married and then learn, chaparayim, and then you get married. Okay, then you're fakrachan. That's how Rashi says it. Taisa actually says not like that. He says a few questions. He says, first of all, I don't understand. He says, it sounds like Shmuel is saying that you're going to get married to a woman first, and then you'll go to Eretz to learn, so you should be without Hihurim. He says, what do you mean? But you're not home with your wife. You're out there and who knows where. You're not going to have Hihurim? It says he's still going to have Hihurim. And he says also, he says that after you get married, how could a guy just go to Eretz Yisrael for like 6 months, this married guy, to go learn the Yarchei Kala for like a few years? What does it mean? He has a responsibility for his children. The Gemara says, Gittin, that if you just shirk the responsibility, you're like giving over your kids to be a Zaina and you're selling your kids for wine, like, what does that mean? So therefore, Rabbeinu Tam says it's exactly the opposite. Rabbi Yochanan that said, how could you learn? You have a Rechaim B'Tzavar, you're going to have the yoke of Parnasa, and you're going to learn Torah. He was talking about for the people of Bavel, meaning they can't just leave their wife and go learn Torah. And also, they were poor. So it was for them that he said, first learn Torah, and then get married. Whereas Shmuel, who said they get married first, was to the people in Eretz Yisrael, where they could learn in their place. And they were also wealthier, and it was good for them. So good, so get married and learn Torah in the state of Tahara. Now, sometimes that so then there's gets a discussion regarding who's Talmidim was what, whatever. But Al Kapon, that's the opposite teachings of Rashi and Taisus regarding who's Halan V'Halu who are the ones that were being told to first learn and then get married, or they say no, get married and then learn. The Maisa, we want to get a state of Tahara, so we want you to get married. But if the Ol Panasa sounds like it's going to be too much, then you're not going to learn. Then it says okay, then learn and then get married afterwards. Now the Gemara brings a story related to getting married. The Mishtabeach Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda praised Rav Huna to Rav Huna when he was talking to him. But did Rav Hamnuna. Regarding Rav Hamnuna, the Ad Megadol, he says, wow, he's a great person. So Amalei Rav Huna said to Rav Chizda, okay, when he comes to you, Heviyahu liyadi, bring him to me. Also, when he came, Chazye, Rav Huna saw this Rav Hamnuna, Lepara Sudra. He didn't have his head covered with a cloth, the way the married people were, that they used to cover their head. Amalei said to him, my time is a Sudra. Why are you not having a cloth over your head? Amalei says, Delay Nasibna, I'm not married. So Rav Huna turned his face away from him. Amalei said to him, Chazi, you should see. I don't want you to see my face adonasvis until you get married. Like turned his face away, says, until you get married. Now the Gemara tells us why. Rav Huna goes according to his reasoning. Somebody says, Ben esim shana v'loinasa isha, if a guy is 20 years old and didn't get married, kol yamav ba'aveira, all his days are in sin. You think all his days are in sin? I'd rather say, kol yamav behiru avera. All his days are going to be in the thoughts of sin, meaning avera generally refers to the avera of gila rayis, and you're always going to be thinking about it because when you already were as a young adult, you weren't married yet, and your thoughts are possessed and obsessed by these things of nashim. So that's it. If you would get married younger, so that's it. You wouldn't have been fall into that trap. But once you're 20, you don't get married. All your days are going to be thinking about this. And Rabbi Shloimy says, Ad chav shana, until a person is 20 years old, Yosher HaKadosh Baruch Hu metzap l'ad. Hashem sits, so to speak, and he waits for the man. Masa yise isha, when's he going to get married to a woman? Together with all the babas and the zaydas. Kim shagia chav nasa. Once the boy reaches 20, does not get married. Oima Hashem says, Tipach atzmaisav, let his bones swell. Amr of Chizda, he says, Haida difna mechabroi, this that I was better than my friends, was the Nesivna B'shitza, because he got married at 16. We have Nesivna Barbeisa, I get married at 14, as Gemara continues, have a meaningless sudden, I would tell the Satan, Giro be'einecha, that there's arrows in your eyes. In other words, I would provoke him, because the Satan is the Yetzirah. I wouldn't be afraid they would cause me to sin, because I was so tahar, because I was a young boy, I got married before I was taken over by the Hizulim. I would have been even greater if I got married at 14. So this is either related teaching or exactly the same topic. While your hand is still on the neck of your son, meaning while you still have some control over your son, before he becomes an adult and he's not going to listen to you anymore, which that age keeps on getting younger and younger in these teenagers. It's already when these tweens, and who knows how low it goes. Marry him off to a woman. How old is that? Mishitzer, from when he's 16 years old, it's already time to get married. But Esther Matarti, and up until 22. But don't wait till later than 22 to get him married. That's one version of what the teaching is. Now, another version of this teaching is, when it means your hand is on the neck of your son, while you still have some control over your child, you should be careful to teach him rebuke. What's the age of that you could teach this young one? It's from 16 until 22. Because younger than 16, he doesn't have intelligence to receive rebuke so much. And you can't really weigh down on him any real rebuke. But more than 22, you have to be concerned that he's going to rebel because he's already old enough and he has a mind of his own. And therefore, Rashi prefers that interpretation more than the one about getting married. But either way, some say, no, it's not 16 to 22. It's mitam nisrei ad esem rabba. It's from 18 until 24. So that would make sense, like we know ben shmoin eser l'chuppah. And here the Gemara then would be saying, according to the first interpretation, up until 24. 24 is the end of the line. You gotta to 25. You gotta be married when you're 25, because that's the ideal age of getting married. Which the Gemara says ketanai. So machlekes tanoim, this idea, especially if you say like the second interpretation that's talking about regarding rebuke, about being mechanech your child. Plus it says initially chanech l'nar, inaugurate, train the child al pidarka according to his path. Meaning, very importantly, Rashi tells us, the path that all his days he will conduct himself in that. You should train him when he's young. Now, what is the age of being young that you should train him? You should be giving him musar and direct him. So we have machlekes Yehuda Reb Nechemia. Hadam one says mishitza vad esem b'tart, and one says from 16 to 22. Hadam one says mitam nisrei vad esem abba, from 18 up until 24. Which again, that's the same machlekes we had before, either for the age of marriage or from the age of directing in life. Thank you to any time for hosting us.